Wanted to make this video as for the recent movement that has been going around to essentially abolish ICE, and essentially and to basically talk about immigration and the entirety of like U.S. history, imperialism, and especially ICE into our today, and like talk about a replacement of agencies, standing armies, and police forces as well during these times. When we have a lot of these situations, especially coming about, and now more than ever, the new Abolish ICE movement that has been going around in Oregon and California right now, or at least a new wave of it that's been more prominent, especially after since the George Floyd protests are almost dying down. New movement has been essentially arose to abolish ICE. So I thought I'd make this video to essentially talk about ICE, and to essentially to just basically just a call to abolish it and free immigrants from detention centers. So yeah, I thought I'd just make this video and like talk about this. So without further ado, let's begin. To begin as like or to like essentially clear up of what ICE is. To begin, ICE is a federal law enforcement agency under the U.S. Department of Homeland Security. ICE stated, quote-unquote, mission is to, quote, protect America from cross-border crime, illegal immigration that threaten national security and public safety, almost at any means necessary, unquote. While this might seem nice, good, right off the read, and with no further research, but ICE's mission is costing the lives of many immigrants and lives of both undocumented and undocumented because of its function as an agency of Homeland Security. To understand this, we have to look at their tactics to quote unquote to protect America from cross-border crime and illegal immigration that threaten national security and public safety. So first off, they receive reports and get information of suspected undocumented immigrants. This can function to various ways depending on the location of the country. 1. Calls from civilians. 2. Spying. 3. Profile history, like medical charts, criminal records, education records, job records, etc. And 4. Breach of privacy without a warrant. Yeah, they can fucking do that. I don't know why, but yeah, no, they can fucking do that. They can fucking do that because as long as because in their eyes, it's a threat to national security and public safety. Most of the time, it's usually the first and the fourth that records show. And obviously, this is multiple problems in different ways, and we're going to talk about this now. This leads to people feeling unsafe, and even the suspect being in no correlation of having any undocumented history to be subjected to very traumatic responses from ICE. This results in false reporting on someone being a suspected undocumented immigrant without clear proof and evidence, as well as an anxiety for privacy, knowing and or thinking an agency can legally spy on you if you are suspected of being an undocumented immigrant, and even not being suspected, but maybe because you just pissed them off in some way. Now that we got ICE as an agency and its tactics down, let's look at the history on how ICE was essentially propagated in the first place. Surprise enough, it's actually a really short history, and it hasn't actually been around for quite a while. It's only been around for considerably recent times. ICE was formed under the Homeland Security Act of 2002, passed by George W. Bush, after the attacks of September 11th, 2001 attacks in the U.S. Since then, they have been training their agents to not trust immigrants and to see any people coming into the United States as liabilities to the U.S. population. If you want proof of it, then you can literally check out their website, or at least their mission, or like their tactics and like kind of like their training that they essentially subject agents to go through. This leads to unwarranted searches and unreasonable arrests. But to understand why is it like to understand just like why there's essentially a call for like essentially kind of like a security of immigration in the first place, we have to look just the U.S.'s involvement or its involvement into Latin America and especially Latin American politics throughout the history of the world. And that's where I'm gonna and that's where we essentially should have to talk about this definitely for sure. So let's talk about the history of U.S. imperialism in Latin America. To track U.S. imperialism in Latin America is quite difficult to pinpoint, but just to understand, the U.S. has been very interested in Latin America since the late 1790s. Anyway, sorry. Yeah. To try and pinpoint Latin America, I guess the imperialism of the United States into Latin America is very difficult, but it has been interested into like Latin America since the late 1790s, so ever since the very start. And it's usually to spread their new transformation period. Well, you can consider as a dictatorship of like merchants or the dictatorship of the peasantry. That's essentially a transformation to capitalism for its capitalist principles. To try and like the rest of the world to export their capital or like the capital that they're trying to formulate into Spanish colonies in Cuba and Mexico. By the 1830s, capitalism had been formed and industrialized in the country further. Because of this, there was a need to get more jobs and call for more proletarians to work in the country. But of course, there was still a ruling class in the southeast of the United States that still had functions to use laborers without wages, which caused a split into American economics. In the North and the West, you had generalized commodity production, hyper-industrialization, thus having a material incentive to buy labor power from workers. In the South and East, you had generalized agricultural and cloth production, thus with a material incentive to buy humans without paying them a wage and buying labor power. Instead, own the human as a form of property. This, of course, led to the Civil War of America, but that's a video for another day. Either way, the United States of America won over the Confederate States of America. Both did have a plan. Both did have a plan to spread their economics beyond its borders, so they can have more money coming in and get more profit. Thus led to the United States, puppet countries, and annexed territories. We saw this in the Spanish-American War. And to understand into our modern-day conflicts of what we can see today. During the Cold War, there was a lot of anti-American involvement ideas going around to have nations decide their own future, which threatened the United States as well, profit motive for its own capitalist exploitation. So when people tried to not even have a worker state, but just have a social democratic government for their own self-determination, they were invaded and subjected to U.S.-backed coups and insurgents that hyper-capitalized their countries and economics. So both regions can get a profit in these times. That's why you saw regimes like Pinochet and so many more capitalist dictatorships in Latin America. That America, the people that brought this in the first place, played little to no attention they brought them into power in the first place. This was usually justified, of course, as fighting against communism or protecting quote-unquote democracy and bring a better future. Our responses are just wrong and absolutely hypocritical, of course. Yet still reasons to keep their anti-communist quote-unquote communist propaganda going, despite the fact that most of these revolutions weren't even communist, other than in countries like Nicaragua, Chile, and Colombia. Because of this dictatorship of hyper-capitalist economics, it led to groups to have little to no regulation and deals and sales for products, especially with times of no infrastructure. This caused what we would probably consider as today cartels, illegal drugs, selling gangs to pop up and give people jobs and to get profit for selling drugs and exporting their sales illegally, forming their own standing armies, governance, enforcement, markets, and so much more that is subjected to even worse tyranny, not just from a social and governmental level, but so much in the economical level. This is what led to people trying to escape and find a better life in a country that started all of this in the first place. The United States of America, of course. Because of this, we see massive immigration rates all over the U.S., Canada, and Mexico. Not because they're a great country and the land is so good. Rather, the former of horrible treatment of people in their own lands and the implication of horrible economical practices that only made the situation even worse. We need to address this and recognize this and be able to call out and show people of Latin America and America to understand exactly what is going on. Now we have to address this current situation. We have to how we treat these people today when they are trying to escape from causes the United States has started in the first place. We need to address this. And now let's go into ICE today and just what it does and how essentially just horrible it really is. ICE today. In our modern times and recent events, ICE has broke so many law codes, rights, freedoms, and people's safety for their own agenda to curb illegal immigration, although in their fight it has caused the loss of lives, separation of families, more parentless children, and further suicide rates in the United States. For this, there's also a need to keep suspected undocumented immigrants in centers that have them very cramped, isolated, and from the rest of their peers and fellow friends, thus leaving the social life, leaving the separation of families, and even in times of people having worsening mental issues that affect their social life forever. This is only further encouraged by both higher officials that are part of the quote-unquote Democratic Party of the United States and the Republican Party of the United States, with little to no regard for the lives of these people. Only a few addressments from the quote-unquote Democratic Party. We cannot rely on them, and especially not rely on Donald Trump, who has only furthered and made more funding for these centers and the bureaucrats. That's why I'm going to call it the Democrats from now on, allowing this to happen. This is why we need alternatives where this won't happen in the first place, and see the total abolition of this very system in the first place. So let's talk about the alternatives. What can we see of the alternative is the mass change of the political and state structure of the United States, having full control of the masses and allowing them to centralize themselves based on their own means of the state. Control of the masses, that being the masses themselves taking control onto the state structure and allowing them to centralize based on their own means for a state structure to be temporarily upheld before it is abolished into the new economic system. What this means for ICE, however, is ICE will simply be abolished. Same with standing armies and other police agencies all throughout the country. This would be replaced by a militia controlled by the common people in their own communities. A proletarian militia, that would be called, where the workers abolish the old bureaucratic justice and rehabilitation system and replace with their own democratic justice and rehabilitative system controlled by all people of the state controlled by all people of the state they control as well, and it's all controlled by all people. The same proletarian militia that was called by Karl Marx, Frederick Engels, Vladimir Lenin, Leon Trotsky, Max Chapman, Hale Draper, Joseph Carter, Julius Jacobson, Ernest Mandel, C.L.R. James, Tony Cliff, John Molyneux, and so many more Marxist authors in the past and our modern day as well. So, to also define furthermore, basically, a proletarian militia, as the name suggests, is a militia controlled by the proletariat that makes decisions about justice, rehabilitation, war, conflicts, and so many more issues in communities to be controlled by everyone in the community to discuss and come to a democratic vote and discussion on what needs to be done. Whatever is the choice of the majority of the people, agree with, it will be passed and done by all people involved. Of course, this will be centralized in times where the bourgeoisie would want to stomp out the state controlled by the workers, but still decided by the proletariat in the centralization process and action. Not only can this work, and it has in various regions all throughout the world, whereas replace the standing army police, and especially what I'm talking about here in this video, agencies as well. We saw this in the Hungarian Soviet Republic, the Russian Socialist Federative Republic, the early USSR before 1925. We saw this in the Socialist Workers' Republic of Finland. We saw this in the Slovak Soviet Republic, Bavarian Soviet Republic, like Alois Lorraine Soviet Republic, and so much more like examples, even here into the modern day, where we can even see in Rojava, and and possibly even Easy LA control territory in Chiapas, Mexico. So in Chiapas, Mexico. Yeah, I am pronouncing that right. I'm Mexican, so I should know that. But yeah. Either way, let's talk about the conclusions here, and essentially come to entirely of a lesson that essentially has to be taught here. So the conclusion of conclusion that we have to essentially take from this video entirely. So what we just have to understand of this video is just merely the fact that ICE is an ineffective regime. It's an ineffective agency. The very fact that ICE exists is entirely a breach of privacy to a common American and to any person living in the United States in the first place. The reason why we essentially have massive immigration is because of our own faults of imperialism that we have subjected into Latin America and have oppressed so many people in so many countries instead of allowing them for their own self-determined regions and allowing them to essentially have the control onto their own production, distribution, all these essential functions that would have helped the region a lot more than what we the fuck did. By subjecting them into dictatorships where it has created cartels in the first place and created our modern day conflicts into Latin America, and only just shows like kind of the authoritarian measures that ICE is essentially willing to take to put immigrants and foreigners into detention centers, where they're usually separated from their families, subjected into various isolated camps, and even then, especially with Arizona, with Joe Arpaio, what he did, even subjecting them into labor camps in the fucking desert heat of Arizona. So yeah, no, there's no justification for ICE. There's no justification for any of this entire functions. And what we need to do for now is to abolish this very system. Advocate for a proletarian militia. Advocate for a militia so that we can abolish the entirety of the standing army, the police force, and all these functions, and essentially give that into the hands of the people. Hands of the people based on their own community and their own decisions based on the majority belief or the majority vote of the people in justice, rehabilitation systems, and war, conflicts, etc., decided by the communities and by all people entirely, rather than by a bureaucracy. This entirely to give democratic functions within the justice and rehabilitative system based on the community itself. That's what we essentially have to understand here. And because of this, what we need to do is essentially abolish the very state that we essentially are under today. Abolish the entirety of the bourgeois state. So get out there. go out, essentially protest against this entire system. Please protest against the entirety of the ICE. Go out there, block ICE buses, get your fellow comrades, and essentially get involved within the anti-ICE movement that is going on right now. What we need to do is essentially help as much foreigners as we can as being subjected into this kind of tyranny, and to stop any bureaucrat that we can that's essentially subjecting them into this kind of tyranny by all means. So get out there, join a party, get in contact with your friends, get them to basically go to your local ICE facility and block off the entirety of the ICE facility to make sure that they don't essentially do any of these functions. Talk to these immigrants. Talk to anyone that essentially subjecting into this kind of tyranny, and talk to even people and tell them about all of these essential functions, so that way we can use that and essentially be able to understand and be able to demand a better life and a better function within the immigration system, and then to just show that they are breaching our privacy, and even then, despite not being a U.S. citizen, breaks multiple law codes on the international basis. We need to show that, and we need to bring these entire agencies, especially ICE, to justice, and to essentially give a better life for undocumented immigrants that are coming in based onto our causes in the first place. And we need to address that. We can't ignore that. And we have to essentially give them something, or something that essentially that can help them. Because if we don't, then is it fair for us to be called a democracy? I'll leave it with those words. Thank you for watching this video. If you enjoyed this video, hit the like button down below. I'd very much appreciate it. If you're new to my channel, hit the subscribe button. I'll also very much appreciate it. And yeah, check out my videos as well if you haven't. I'm going to be uploading some videos on this as well. But yeah, thank you for watching this video. And yep, Socialist Links is out. See ya.